In the heart of Washington, D.C., the air carried an unmistakable tension, a mix of political ambition and the quiet hum of everyday resilience. Karoline Levitt, at just 27 years old and the youngest White House press secretary in American history, was no stranger to the weight of public scrutiny. Her office, nestled in a modern apartment near the White House, had seen countless crises. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the day when a single piece of jewelry, a small silver cross, would ignite a national debate on faith, justice, and freedom. It was a warm afternoon when Karoline's phone rang in her immaculate apartment. Sunlight filtered through the window, catching the glimmer of the silver cross pinned to her navy blazer, a symbol of her deeply held beliefs from her New England roots. As she answered, the voice on the other end was crisp and urgent. "Karoline, we've got an emergency at the Jefferson District Court in downtown D.C. A group of devoted citizens has filed a lawsuit, claiming that a new policy is denying them the right to pray in public spaces. I need you there immediately to cover the story." Without a moment's hesitation, Karoline's mind switched into high gear. She quickly organized her documents and donned her signature professional attire. The cross, which had always been a quiet emblem of her personal faith, now took on a weightier meaning. Today, it was not just an accessory, it was a declaration of principle. As she stepped out into the bustling streets of the capital, Karoline's thoughts were a whirlwind. The case, although seemingly minor, had all the hallmarks of a moment that could spark a larger conversation about individual rights and government overreach. Her mission was clear: report on the unfolding story and, if necessary, become a part of it. Karoline climbed into her sleek black SUV and merged into the city's relentless traffic. The rhythmic beeps of car horns and the distant chatter of pedestrians filled the air, yet all she could focus on was the case at hand. She recalled the details. A group of everyday Americans, devout in their beliefs, had taken a stand against what they perceived as an unjust restriction on their right to public prayer. While the matter might have seemed trivial to some, Karoline knew that at its core was a battle over constitutional rights. Driving past familiar landmarks, Karoline's mind wandered to the power of symbolism. The silver cross on her blazer, which had once been a subtle nod to her heritage, was now a beacon of defiance. In that moment, it wasn't just about her story. It was about every American who believed in the sanctity of personal freedom. Upon arriving at the Jefferson District Court, Karoline was struck by the building's imposing facade. Its granite columns and classical design were a testament to America's long-standing traditions of law and order. Yet, as she stepped inside, she encountered an atmosphere far removed from the solemnity of the architecture. The courtroom buzzed with the murmurs of onlookers, the clatter of keyboards from busy clerks, and the rustle of papers that spoke of a system in constant motion. Karoline made her way to a vacant seat near the center of the room. She arranged her document bag neatly beside her and, with measured calm, took a seat. Across the courtroom, a motley group of citizens gathered. Among them, a man in a t-shirt boldly printed with "Empower Change," and a young woman wearing a dazzling necklace that sparkled under the harsh fluorescent lights. Their eyes briefly met hers, curiosity and silent support glimmering in their expressions. Then the courtroom doors swung open. In strode Judge Benjamin Harris, a man whose reputation for unwavering strictness was as well known as the country's love for justice. With neatly combed dark hair, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, and an air of stern authority, Judge Harris commanded every gaze in the room. His presence was imposing, and the sudden hush that fell over the courtroom spoke volumes. "Good afternoon," Judge Harris intoned, his voice deep and deliberate. "Today we will hear a case regarding the recent lawsuit filed by a group of citizens who claim their right to pray in public spaces has been infringed upon. But before we begin, I must address a matter of courtroom decorum." His eyes swept across the room until they landed on Karoline. With a slight narrowing of his gaze, he pointed to the silver cross on her collar. "Miss Levitt," he said, his tone measured yet firm, "this courtroom maintains strict neutrality. Any display of personal belief must be set aside while proceedings are ongoing. I must insist that you remove that cross immediately." Karoline rose slowly from her seat, every eye fixed on her. Her pulse quickened, but her voice remained clear and resolute. Your Honor, I am Karoline Levitt, White House Press Secretary. This cross is not a tool for disruption. It is a personal symbol of faith, protected under the First Amendment. I see no rule that prohibits its display. Judge Harris's eyes flashed with disapproval. In my courtroom, he declared, slamming his gavel with a resounding boom, any act that draws attention to personal beliefs is considered a breach of decorum. I hereby fine you $500 for contempt of court. A collective gasp filled the room. The man in the Empower Change t-shirt and the young woman with the glittering necklace exchanged shocked glances, their silent support for Karoline palpable. In that charged moment, what had begun as a routine press assignment was evolving into a defining confrontation. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Karoline stood before the judge, her eyes locked on his with unwavering determination. In the silence that followed, she activated her phone's recording function, ensuring every word was captured for posterity. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady and imbued with quiet authority. If there exists any rule that forbids the display of religious symbols in this courtroom, I respectfully request its citation. I refer to the Supreme Court ruling in Church of Lukumi Babalu versus City of Hialeah, which clearly upholds the right to express one's faith. Her words echoed off the courtroom's walls, igniting a ripple of murmurs and whispers among the onlookers. Phones were raised, recording every syllable of what was rapidly becoming a historic moment. Judge Harris's face reddened with a mixture of anger and uncertainty, yet he was determined to maintain control. Miss Levitt, you are not here to lecture me on constitutional law, he snapped, his tone growing harsher. Your personal expression is creating unnecessary disruption in this court. Karoline stepped even closer to the bench, her voice unwavering. Your Honor, if my display of faith is disruptive, then what of every American who wears a symbol of their belief? If order means silencing personal identity, then we must ask, what is the true purpose of this courtroom? Her challenge was met with a charged silence that rippled through the room. In that moment, Karoline was more than just a press secretary. She was a living embodiment of the principles of freedom and justice. The hashtag #CrossInCourtUSA began to form on social media as witnesses in the courtroom and those watching online sensed that history was being made. With a trembling hand, Judge Harris banged his gavel again. Miss Levitt, this court demands respect for its decorum. You are hereby held in contempt, and your fine is non-negotiable. Sit down. But Karoline refused to retreat. In a voice that carried both empathy and resolve, she responded, if my right to display my faith is considered contempt, then we must question whether these rules serve justice or merely the convenience of those in power. The room erupted in murmurs of approval. Even the bailiff, David Simmons, a seasoned officer known for his fairness, nodded subtly in support. Outside the courthouse, the story spread like wildfire. Within minutes, social media platforms were abuzz with the confrontation at Jefferson District Court. Hashtags such as #CrossInCourtUSA and #FaithAndFreedom began trending, and influential voices, from legal analysts to prominent activists, weighed in on the controversy. Karoline, though still in the courthouse, could see the tide of public sentiment shifting. Her smartphone vibrated incessantly with messages of support. People from all corners of America were voicing their admiration for her courage and clarity, a sentiment that went far beyond a mere legal dispute. This was a moment that resonated with the core values of American freedom and individual rights. In a small corner of the courtroom, Karoline's colleagues and several sympathetic court staff exchanged knowing glances. Mrs. Jenkins, the longtime court clerk known for her discretion and kindness, whispered to David Simmons, I've seen too many cases like this. Today might just be the turning point we've all been waiting for. Judge Harris, now visibly flustered, tried to regain his composure. But the digital record of the event was already forming, and with every new post and retweet, the pressure mounted on the judicial system to respond. The fine, intended as a demonstration of courtroom authority, had instead become a catalyst for a broader conversation about bias and the right to self-expression. In the days that followed, the repercussions of that single confrontation were felt far and wide. The D.C. Judicial Council, under mounting public pressure, initiated an investigation into the matter. Led by a meticulous investigator named Rebecca Monroe, whose 25 years in judicial oversight had earned her a reputation for fairness and rigor, the inquiry began to uncover patterns that went beyond Karoline's case. Rebecca pored over months of courtroom records from Jefferson District Court. What she discovered was unsettling. A disproportionate number of fines and disciplinary actions were levied against individuals for wearing religious symbols. An imbalance that suggested not only a misapplication of rules, but an underlying bias that threatened the very fabric of justice. Rebecca's preliminary report detailed numerous instances where individuals, ranging from a high school teacher wearing a small cross to a grandmother sporting a hijab, had been fined or reprimanded for what appeared to be minor breaches of decorum. The numbers were stark. Cases involving religious symbols were penalized at nearly twice the rate of other dress code violations. The data was irrefutable. Her findings soon became public. News outlets across the country picked up the story, and the public reaction was swift and fierce. In editorials and opinion pieces, commentators decried what they saw as an affront to the First Amendment. Meanwhile, supporters of religious freedom hailed Karoline as a hero, an unlikely champion standing up not just for herself, but for every American's right to express their identity. As the investigation unfolded, grassroots movements began to coalesce around the issue. Across cities like Atlanta, Houston, and Boston, community leaders organized rallies demanding greater accountability in the judicial system. In town halls and public forums, citizens shared personal stories of how seemingly minor infractions had disrupted their lives. Stories that resonated deeply with a public already sensitized by the turbulent political climate. Karoline found herself inundated with invitations to speak at community events, universities, and even national television programs. While her initial role had been purely that of a press secretary, she was quickly recognized as a voice of reason and resilience. In one particularly moving speech at a community center in Houston, Karoline said, "This isn't about a fine. It's about our right to be who we are. If the symbols that define our faith are being targeted, then every American must stand up to protect the freedoms that are the cornerstone of our nation." The momentum was undeniable. Within weeks, the Jefferson District Court was forced to reconsider its policies. Under pressure from the D.C. Judicial Council and public opinion, Judge Harris was summoned to a series of hearings. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he attempted to justify his actions, citing the need for maintaining order and decorum. But his words fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence that his methods were anything but impartial. In a televised press conference, Rebecca Monroe presented the findings of her investigation. The data shows that there is a clear pattern of bias when it comes to the enforcement of dress code rules in our courts, she declared. This isn't just about one judge or one fine. It's about systemic practices that need urgent reform. The conference was met with applause from supporters of religious freedom and civil rights advocates, further cementing Karoline's case as a watershed moment in the ongoing battle for equal treatment under the law. The reverberations of the investigation were felt even at the highest levels of government. In a move that many saw as a direct response to the public outcry, the White House issued a statement praising Karoline for her courage and urging the judicial system to reaffirm the values of fairness and equality. The president himself, in a tweet that quickly went viral, proclaimed, "Karoline Levitt is a true guardian of our Constitution. Her bravery in standing up for our freedoms has inspired millions." Back in the courtroom, the transformation was palpable. The Jefferson District Court, once a bastion of rigid authority, had become a symbol of the power of accountability. Under the watchful eye of the D.C. Judicial Council, sweeping reforms were implemented. New policies clearly stated that religious symbols would not be prohibited unless they demonstrably disrupted proceedings. Moreover, every court official, from judges to clerks, was now required to undergo comprehensive training on First Amendment rights and the importance of impartiality. Judge Harris, whose career had taken an unexpected nosedive, was suspended pending a full review of his actions. In a rare act of contrition, he later released a statement acknowledging his error and pledging to undergo further education on constitutional rights. "I realize now that my personal biases have clouded my judgment," he admitted in a measured tone. "I am committed to learning from this experience and ensuring that every individual's rights are respected in my courtroom." For Karoline, the victory was bittersweet. Though she had never sought the limelight, her stand had ignited a movement that transcended a single courtroom battle. She remained humble, always quick to credit the collective spirit of the American people rather than her own courage alone. "This isn't just my win. It's a win for every American who believes in freedom," she remarked in a follow-up interview, her voice soft but determined. "Together, we can make sure that our rights are never taken for granted." The reforms at Jefferson District Court were just the beginning. The story of Karoline Levitt's defiant stand had ignited a nationwide debate about religious freedom and judicial accountability. In cities from San Francisco to New Orleans, community groups began hosting forums on constitutional rights and the importance of individual expression. At a rally in Atlanta, a young activist holding a small cross aloft proclaimed, "This is our right. No one should ever be fined for simply being who they are." As media coverage expanded, more Americans found the courage to share their own experiences of discrimination and bias in the name of maintaining order. These testimonies ranged from a teacher who had been reprimanded for wearing a subtle religious pendant to a veteran who was told that his military dog tags, inscribed with a religious motto, were inappropriate. Each account added fuel to the growing call for comprehensive reform. University campuses became hubs of discussion, with professors hosting debates on the delicate balance between upholding decorum and protecting individual freedoms. In one spirited seminar at Georgetown University, a law professor noted, "Karoline Levitt's case challenges us to rethink the very foundations of what we consider order in our legal system. It's a powerful reminder that the law must protect the diverse expressions of our society, not suppress them." The hashtag #CrossingCourtUSA continued to trend on social media, morphing into a symbol of collective resilience. Influencers, legal experts, and even ordinary citizens used the platform to call for change. Videos, blog posts, and podcasts proliferated, each echoing the sentiment that a single act of defiance could be the spark for a national transformation. Karoline's calm, measured voice in the courtroom had become the rallying cry for millions, a testament to the enduring power of standing up for one's beliefs. As autumn settled over Washington, D.C., the nation was abuzz with talk of reform and renewal. The Jefferson District Court had become a case study in the importance of judicial transparency and accountability. The sweeping reforms that followed were seen as a victory for all those who believed in the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Karoline Levitt continued to work at the White House, but her role had evolved. No longer was she merely a spokesperson. She had become a symbol of hope and change. Invitations to speak at national conferences and legal symposiums poured in, and she found herself at the forefront of discussions on how to ensure that justice was administered fairly, without prejudice. In a reflective moment, Karoline recalled the events of that fateful day in the courtroom. "I never imagined that a small cross would become the catalyst for such sweeping change," she confided in a private conversation with a trusted colleague. "It wasn't about making a statement for myself. It was about defending the right of every American to express who they are, to hold on to their beliefs, and to live without fear of repression." Her words resonated deeply with those who had followed the unfolding drama. Across the country, citizens celebrated this newfound clarity in the judicial system, while others remained vigilant, aware that the fight for justice was an ongoing endeavor. Karoline's own journey was far from over. With every victory came the reminder that change required constant vigilance and a willingness to confront injustice wherever it appeared. At a celebratory dinner organized by a coalition of civil rights advocates, Karoline addressed a room full of impassioned supporters. "Today, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us," she declared, her voice echoing with sincerity. "But we must also recognize that every day presents an opportunity to build a more just and inclusive society. Our fight for freedom is not over. It is a continuous journey, one that we must travel together." 3 months after that defining day at Jefferson District Court, Karoline Levitt stood once again before a packed auditorium in downtown D.C. The event was organized by a coalition of faith leaders, legal scholars, and community organizers dedicated to safeguarding constitutional rights. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of hope, determination, and a shared belief in the power of collective action. In her keynote address, Karoline recounted the events of the courtroom confrontation. "I was fined for wearing a cross," she began, her voice calm and resolute. "But that fine was never about punishment. It was about challenging a system that too often silences personal expression in the name of order. Today, we stand together to remind our nation that our differences are not weaknesses. They are strengths." The audience erupted into applause. For many, Karoline's story had become a beacon of light in a world that sometimes seemed mired in division and intolerance. Her courage had sparked conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms across America. And as people left the auditorium that day, many felt empowered to stand up for their own rights and to challenge systems that threatened to diminish the beauty of diversity. Later, in a quiet moment backstage, Karoline reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fine, the courtroom battle, the subsequent reforms. It had all coalesced into a profound lesson that every act of bravery, no matter how small, has the power to transform society. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself. "Every challenge is an opportunity to build a better future." In the months that followed, the reform measures implemented at Jefferson District Court began to ripple across the nation. States such as California, New York, and Illinois initiated reviews of their own judicial practices, spurred on by the undeniable impact of Karoline's stand. Grassroots organizations organized workshops on constitutional rights, and local media outlets dedicated special segments to exploring how personal expression was being protected, and sometimes compromised, across the country. Karoline continued her work at the White House, but she also became a mentor to many young advocates and legal interns. Her daily routine now included meetings with community leaders, discussions on reform strategies, and public speaking engagements that highlighted the importance of upholding the values that defined America. She frequently recalled that fateful day, not with bitterness, but with a sense of purpose. "We must never allow fear or bias to silence the truths that lie at the heart of our identity," she would say. One evening, as Karoline sat in her office overlooking the illuminated skyline of Washington, D.C., she penned a brief message to a colleague. "Today, the cross on my lapel is not just a reminder of my faith. It is a testament to our enduring commitment to freedom and justice." That simple sentiment encapsulated the transformation that had taken place, one that was personal, yet deeply entwined with the broader struggle for human rights. In the final analysis, Karoline Levitt's story was more than a legal battle. It was a narrative of empowerment, a call to action for every American to stand up against injustice, no matter how deeply entrenched. It was a reminder that when one person dares to speak out, the echoes of that courage can resonate throughout the halls of power, inspiring change and rekindling the spirit of liberty in the hearts of millions. Years later, the legacy of that day in the Jefferson District Court remained a pivotal chapter in the annals of American justice. Karoline Levitt, now a seasoned advocate and respected leader, often revisited the memories of that defining moment. The reforms that followed had paved the way for a judicial system that was more transparent, more accountable, and more inclusive. At an annual symposium on civil rights held in Washington, D.C., Karoline addressed a new generation of activists. "Our journey," she said, "is not measured solely by the victories we achieve, but by the courage we display in standing up for what is right, even when the odds are against us. Every symbol of faith, every expression of identity, is a part of the rich tapestry that makes us who we are as a nation." Her words were met with a standing ovation, a resounding affirmation that the fight for justice, though fraught with challenges, was one that every American had a stake in. Karoline's message transcended political divisions, uniting people under the banner of freedom, resilience, and hope. And so, the story of Karoline Levitt, the day she was fined for wearing a cross only to spark a nationwide movement, became a part of the living narrative of America. It was a tale that would be told and retold, a story of determination, of standing up to entrenched authority, and of the belief that every person has the power to change the world.